Chapter 31. What Lies Inside? "We have their attention now!" Kate yelled out, making light of the situation and hoping to calm the nerves of those around her. "Yeah, but did we really need the attention of so many?" Carlos hollered back over the sound of hundreds of bullets shrieking through the air just above his head. Staying as low as his large-framed body would allow, Carlos moved from one end of the container to the other, firing once and sometimes twice before moving. He judged when to move based on whether the target he was shooting at was still standing or dead, targets that seemed to multiply. "You have to keep moving!" Carlos yelled to Sierra after noticing that she had been lying on the ground in the same place for some time, firing without moving. "Yes, father. But if I kill them before they see me, then why move?" Sierra fired once again, only this time sliding slightly over to conceal more of her body behind the right end of the crate. "Call me father again and I'll bend you over my knee," Carlos replied, even though he liked that she thought of him as family. "Forget about the bullets. I think the smell is going to kill me first. I think it is getting stronger." Sierra fired once more while trying to keep her gag reflex in control. "Oh, I'm sure you smelled worse back on the ranch," Carlos remarked. Sierra fired her weapon as she worked quickly to come up with a reply before Carlos moved to the far end of the container from which he was firing. Thoughts of the hog pen came to mind as she inhaled once more. Even the hog pens didn't smell this bad. Hell, the only thing that came this close was when the 27 cows were killed by lightning in the north 40 of the farm. She thought Sierra froze, thinking about the two smells. Quickly, she pulled back behind the container and looked across the field they had traveled from the wood line. With the sun now cresting the horizon, light shined on the bare, soft spots she had noticed earlier. "About time you decided to move," Carlos joked, seeing Sierra with her back to the black container. Carlos could tell Sierra was bothered by something and figured she just had a close call and needed a minute. He moved to the other end of the container away from her. Sierra looked out over the field at the freshly dug earth and then to the stack of containers. It didn't take her but a second to realize they were the same size. Looking closer at the stack, she noticed just why the smell had become much stronger since the firing began. One of the large containers with the lid sitting by itself just feet behind them had been hit multiple times by gunfire. Sierra changed her empty magazine out for a full one. "I have to see," she thought. Carlos returned to the end of his container closest to Sierra before taking aim around. He saw Sierra jump up and move to the single container. Seeing that she was moving and still in the fight, he took aim around the corner of the container at another man. At this point, it didn't matter to him if they were Americans, just that they had a weapon and were firing at them. Sierra moved nearer to the container, paying close attention to where bullets had pierced the side, allowing liquid to leak out. The smell noticeably increased as she neared the container that came up to her waist in height. On top of the lid sat a ratchet wrench and bolts to secure it in place. Lifting one corner of the massive lid, the smell caused Sierra to gag. With the sun shining from low in the sky behind her, Sierra looked in through the opening. Inside the container, she could see it didn't contain dead animals but people. Sierra lost her grip on the lid as her fingers went limp, and her stomach convulsed violently, doubling her over. The contents of her stomach came up so quickly that Sierra had no time to prepare before they passed through her lips to the ground. Carlos fired 3 rounds and looked back to Sierra. To Carlos, it appeared she was ducking behind the container, something he was happy to see, as he was beginning to feel that the girl's fearlessness was going to get her killed. "You know, they must have started attacking from the left by now, but it only seems like there are more of these bastards coming our way," Carlos hollered back to Sierra, though he figured she heard very little as the gunfire made it difficult to hear even his own thoughts. Sierra felt blinding rage boiling up inside, and for the first time in her life, she knew what it meant to be so mad you saw red. Still bent over and finally getting the dry heaves under control, Sierra reached up with her left hand and wiped her lips and chin. With each second that passed, her heart beat faster as adrenaline mixed with rage and began to take control. Letting her M4 rifle hang on the strap draped around her shoulder, Sierra grabbed the bill of her hat with her right hand and the ponytail running through the back with her left. Pulling both in opposite directions, She adjusted everything just right as she thought about her next move. Sierra struggled to think clearly. The images inside the container kept taking over her thoughts. After a few seconds that seemed like minutes, Sierra looked down both ways of the attack line. Seeing soldiers holding the ground all along the line, and a few lying motionless on the ground, Sierra turned and ran, not for the tree line to the rear, but down the line of containers away from the side from which Karnak was to lead a charge. With her pistols strapped tight to her hips and the M4 rifle in her hands, Sierra ran as hard as she could, not stopping for the gaps between the stacks of containers that enemy bullets flew between looking for flesh. Sierra pictured one thing, and that was others being executed while the fight raged outside. Close to the end of the row, Sierra slowed down and then came to a stop next to a half-dozen soldiers holding the end of the line. Sierra looked around the stack of containers at the building she spotted from the ridge that housed the veterans. Just as she located the route she would run to the building, a bullet struck the containers just above her head, causing her to pull back. "Any of you boys have a grenade on you?" Sierra asked. "Yes, but they aren't close enough to use them yet," one of the soldiers commented, while reaching out with a grenade from his vest. Taking the grenade, Sierra pulled the pin and let it fall to the ground. "It isn't for them. Cover me." Before the soldiers had a chance to take aim around the stack of containers, Sierra was on her way, sprinting across the open space between them and the building. With the grenade gripped tight in her right hand and the M4 held steady in her left as it hung by her strap, Sierra ran in a zigzag pattern as bullets screamed through the air seemingly all around. The amount of anger she felt clouded her thoughts and blocked out most of what was going on around her as she neared the 20-foot fence in her way. Drawing back her right hand as her left foot struck the ground, Sierra released the spoon, starting the grenade's 5-second timer. She launched the grenade as she pushed off with her right leg. It arched through the air, making contact with the fence just feet above the ground, and dropped. As soon as the grenade left Sierra's fingertips, she dove forward into the waist-high grass to prevent catching shrapnel as the explosion from the grenade opened up a large hole in the fence. Sierra didn't know if the men were providing her with cover due to the increasing rate of gunfire, but the only thing that mattered was that she hadn't been hit yet. Jumping quickly to her feet, Sierra gripped the M4 rifle in her right hand with her finger on the trigger as she headed for the opening. Scanning the area for and finding multiple threats, Sierra fired only at those she felt would slow her down. Even with being very selective, her rifle seemed to fire constantly as she neared the fence. Pushing through where the grenade had torn links apart, Sierra eyed a door off to the right. Once through the fence, zigzagging from side to side was over, and logic and reason were gone. The only thought that filled Sierra's head was killing every person responsible for what had been going on at the camp up until now. Sierra felt the bolt of the M4 locked to the rear after the last round fired had been ejected. Still at least 100 feet from the door, Sierra kept running while ejecting the empty mag and drawing another from her vest pocket, slapping it into the rifle just as she had practiced over the last few months. Very little time passed between the last round of the empty mag and the first round of the full. Watching the door begin to open as she approached, Sierra took aim as a guard began to exit. Firing 2 quick shots from her M4, she watched the guard fall back slightly into the building as his knees buckled beneath him. Arriving at the door just as the guard finished his deathfall, Sierra fired 2 more rounds through the slight opening of the door. Grabbing hold of the door with her left hand while holding the rifle pointed at the door with her right, Sierra opened it to find the body of a second guard rolled out over the first. It was situations like these that caused Sierra to trust her instincts. Entering through the door, Sierra focused on any movement that presented itself. Just inside the door, Sierra spotted a room with rows of gym lockers. Entering the room as if she had been there many times, Sierra could see the surprise on its occupants' faces as she began dropping them one by one before moving down the hall. Carlos moved his position and fired his rifle once again, thinking it was the 3rd time he fired and moved since seeing Sierra duck behind the container. Grim thoughts began to get the best of him as he turned to the container and called out to her. "Sierra! Sierra!" Carlos knew he would have to move closer for her to hear over the massive amount of weapons fire. Staying low, Carlos quickly ran over to and then around the container as he prepared himself for what he might find. "Sierra!" Carlos called out loudly as he came around the corner of the container. To his surprise, nothing was there. Carlos looked around frantically, calling out her name as the battle raged on. Walking down the hallway, Sierra felt the need to make those running the camp pay for what they were doing and what they had done. Still, a part of her wanted to believe that there could still be good people working in the place. Each would be judged by their actions. Each of the CERT or Strong Cities Network personnel who pointed a weapon in her direction quickly received judgment and execution. As she moved, Sierra picked up extra magazines full of ammunition from those who had made the mistake of showing the wrong actions. Sierra didn't hesitate or spare bullets as the number of personnel increased. Behind her lay a trail of brass, blood, and bodies. Only focusing on those to her front, Sierra quickly remembered the importance of teamwork as bullets struck her from behind. Losing all control of her body due to the kinetic force of the bullets, Sierra lost her grip on the rifle as her arms went limp at her sides. Sierra could feel her hat leave her head and her hair fly free as her body was propelled forward. The last thought she had was to grab the hat she loved so much, but she was unsuccessful before the darkness overtook her.